Welcome to class. I'm Trevor, and I post D&D videos every week, generally on Wednesdays. In this video, I'm going to provide some more 5th edition homebrew inspired by Magic the Gathering, but instead of it being based on a Magic the Gathering monster, I actually have some magic items for you. If you're new to the channel, you might not know that I've actually done a lot of Strixhaven content already. When Strixhaven, the set, released for Magic the Gathering, I immediately fell in love with it. It reminded me of growing up and reading the Harry Potter series, and I know there are a lot of negative associations with that book now, and I think the set actually did a good job differentiating itself, but I just fell in love with the lore and the setting. So I made a background system, I made rules for Mage Tower, I took a lot of inspiration from how WotC set up the Theros and Ravnica books, but all of those videos are on the channel, and I'm very excited to see what the Strixhaven sourcebook has in store. But it's not out yet, and I wanted to do some more Strixhaven content in celebration of that book's impending arrival. I know it got pushed back a little bit. So in this video, I actually took 3 cards from Strixhaven and made magic items for them. Let's see what they are. The first magic item is a fairly common or uncommon magic item, and it's just the Letter of Acceptance. The card looks like this, and the magic item has a recorded message. So the way that it works is when you open the Letter of Acceptance, it turns into an animated papercraft owl, and it speaks a recorded message and then unanimates. The message that's most commonly kind of recorded into these owls is something along the lines of, "Welcome, potential student. You've been accepted into Strixhaven University. Please report to campus at your earliest convenience." And then it folds back into its normal kind of letter form. I would rule that a player, if they pass a particular Arcana check, could maybe manipulate this and record a new message into it. I think that would be a fun prank players would be able to play when they're at school and interacting with one another. But I just wanted to have a common, flavorful magic item, and this seemed like a very low bar entry point for something to work with. It would be a cool way for players to be able to exchange messages as well. I could even see it working like the message spell with obvious limitations because it is something still physical being transported back and forth. The second magic item was inspired by the card Spell Satchel. Now, when I saw this card, I immediately thought of a Bag of Holding or the Handy Haversack, but I didn't want to just rename or reflavor an existing magic item, so I tweaked it and came up with something new. The Spell Satchel magic item that I came up with has the following effects. It protects scrolls and books from any elemental damage. So you could submerge this bag in water and everything would be fine. Even time. If you keep a book in here, it's not going to fade with time or anything like that. That seemed pretty cool, and it seemed like a useful magic item for a magical school to have. In addition to this, the spell scrolls and books that occupy the space do not take up room or add weight. Other things still would. But this would be a great magic item for a wizard who's collecting a lot of paper or books because it's kind of like a pocket library. Or I guess a Kindle, now that I think about it, but I didn't really think it through in that capacity. Regardless, all of that stuff to me seems like a common or uncommon magic item. I did add one other effect to this if you want to bump this up, right? As described, I think it would be like common or uncommon, but this additional effect would definitely make it uncommon or rare. The way that it works is if you cast a spell with a spell scroll, you would consume the spell scroll and you'd roll. And depending on the result of your roll, a copy of that spell scroll might appear in the bag. My thought process was there are a lot of spell scrolls depicted in Strixhaven cards for Magic. And this seemed like a really cool way to have the option or the potential to reuse this otherwise limited resource, but it wasn't guaranteed. A lot of the specifically lore hold cards illustrate lore mages using spell scrolls. Mark Rosewater talked about this in one of his Drive to Work podcasts when Strixhaven was coming out. And I mentioned it in one of my other Strixhaven videos as well. But I thought just that being part of this magical backpack, right? This property where it might be able to replicate or salvage a spell scroll seemed like a really cool thing. But I understand that it could potentially unbalance things because one of the benefits of consumable magic items like spell scrolls and potions is just that. They are consumable. But the fact that it's not a guarantee, I think does help keep the object or the magic item in control. It's not going to get too out of hand. But obviously it's up to DM discretion if you want to give this to your players in the first place. I think it's really cool. And if I were to give this item to my players, I probably would give it in this state. Alternatively, here's another option, just thinking of it on the fly. You could give it to them with just the first two, right? The protection from elemental damage and the no weight. But if they perform a particular set of deeds or they kind of level up, not in terms of their player level, but they get a certain amount of prestige with their college, maybe this is an enchantment that can be added later. Sort of like a object that levels with them. That seems like a really cool kind of fix. So you could award this early, and it could power up with the players later on throughout the game. And finally, the last magic item that I made was Elementalist's Palette. This is from one of the commander decks that came out with Strixhaven. And it's these elemental, like, it looks like pieces of stone or maybe like charcoal that are used in Prismari performances or Prismari art. It's a magic card that cares about X spells, and I was trying to think about a way to do that because you can scale spells in 5e with different spell slots, but I didn't go with that. Instead, I went with more of the name, Elementalist's Palette. Here's what the card does. So this object does 3 things. First, it requires attunement by probably a bard, sorcerer, or wizard, and it gives disadvantage on evocation saving throws. So if you target a creature, or if a creature that you are fighting is affected by one of your evocation spells, they would roll the saving throw with disadvantage. Also, you get to choose the damage type for your evocation spells. So if you're attuned to this item and you say you kind of grab this component pouch or grab this magic item and you're focusing on these elemental gems, you might throw a fireball, but in midair it turns into a ball of ice and it does cold damage instead of fire damage. That seems really cool to me, and I don't see that breaking the game in any capacity. And the last thing you could do with this magic item is it could add a d6 to the damage rolls for your evocation spells. These are a lot of effects, and this can obviously ramp up damage for spells that are already damaging spells. You could easily axe off that last ability where it increases damage if you wanted to keep this item a bit more under control in terms of power level. Or, like we did with Spell Satchel, you could just add that effect on as the player becomes more refined or attuned to the item over time. It could level up with your players. It just seemed like a cool way to amp up damage a little bit and kind of channel the flavor of the card, at least based on the art and description of the card, like the flavor text, less so the mechanics of the card. I'm still trying to think of a way to match that like X spell, something like I could easily see a way where like this item triggered or got some sort of charge whenever you upcast a spell, but like that's the wheels are still turning for that one. I don't know exactly how I would make a magic item that would work that way or what it would do. If you have ideas about that, right, like this item being more directly tied to the magic card effect, let me know in the comments down below because I'd love to see that. I think that anything that would benefit players from like using spell slots differently, I think that that's really cool. So that's another way to look at this, right? That's one of the reasons why I really love taking inspiration from magic cards. You have so much to work with. You can base homebrew off of the art, off of the flavor text, or off of the actual mechanics of the card. And sometimes all those things line up, and sometimes they cause like diverging paths where you have a lot of different homebrew you can create based off of one source material. So those are 3 magic items inspired by Strixhaven. I'm looking forward to that book coming out. And I also do have some other homebrew planned for some Strixhaven monsters, more in line with the other videos that I've been releasing on this channel. If you have any requests for magic cards you want to see turned into 5th edition homebrew, drop them in the comments down below. And if you like this kind of Magic the Gathering and 5e crossover content, subscribe to this channel. It would mean the world. As I always say, be safe, make smart life choices.